Hello and welcome back to another episode of our Bonedo Vintage series. This episode today is all about this Ludwig Super Classic set, which I painstakingly restored over a period of a couple of months. A few years back I was contacted by a colleague of mine, and apparently he had some friends where someone passed away, and that particular person that passed away was a drummer. Back then I did not exactly know which set it was, so I drove there basically, and then I discovered that it's, wow, a Ludwig. So it's a Ludwig Super Classic outfit. Sizes are 13 by 9, 16 by 16, 22 by 14. And what was also included was this wonderful Ludwig 14 by 6.5 Superphonic. So all in all, it was a great find. However, the snare was in very good shape. I only had to polish this and it was a pretty easy job. But the set was sadly in a horrible condition. It's old, it's from 1966. The snare is from 1968. But the kit itself was in rough shape. So originally it was in white marine pearl, and it had like a zillion of extra holes. I don't know why. Apparently the guy who played it before did some kind of DIY jobs and put some pipes for cymbals or whatever on it. I don't know. Anyway, it had like zillions of extra holes. When I first looked at it, I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do with it. However, I gave my promise that I'm going to restore the kit to its former glory. And it took me a while to realize that it's quite a huge project. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to keep it. But as always, it takes a bit of time till ideas ripe. So basically the first step I did was I removed the old white marine pearl wrap, which is really a pain in the ass. I don't know if anybody here ever removed wrap from an old vintage Ludwig. It's difficult. It really is. So that was really a huge amount of work. Afterwards, I did this together with my girlfriend, and my mom also helped, by the way, with some stuff. So it was a bit of a family job, which was cool. I never done this before, so it was cool project. The holes of all the drums, or that were in the drums, were filled with wood. Afterwards, we did a lot of sanding. As you may know, the old, or some of the old Ludwig shells are painted. That paint doesn't do anything sound-wise. It's just there for cosmetic reasons, because when I started to sand and when I removed the paint, which was also in rough shape, I realized why. Because the materials, the wood material that Ludwig used wasn't aesthetically beautiful back in the day. So it did not look very nice. And I think, or I heard and I read, that was the reason why Ludwig decided to apply some white paint on the inside of the drums. So then sanding done, reapplying the lacquer on the inside of the shell. Next step, then was the recut of the bearing edges, which were also totally destroyed. So that set was absolutely untuned. I mean, it wasn't playable, but like also untunable. Really, it was a mess. And I therefore went to ST Drums in Pirmasens, and they helped me with recutting the bearing edges. So I tried to stay as original as possible. And the bearing edges are like the typically Ludwig 45 degree with the round overcut. So basically the hybrid of like 45 and round bearing edge, which you also hear in the video. They are very, very sensitive now, but they have that typical Ludwig warmth, which every player likes. I also obtained the new wrap, so I was never a particular fan of the Ludwig White Marine Pearl wrap, to be honest. I think it's a bit boring. I don't know. Maybe I will now offend some people who watch this video, but I'm not a huge fan of White Marine Pearl. Don't know why. So I choose a Gold Sparkle by Denmark, which I also obtained at ST Drums, and they also helped me with applying the wrap on the shell. So thank you very much for doing that. Was definitely a very, very good job. Another funny fact, when I started removing the old White Marine Pearl, I'm jumping back a bit, I realized that every shell is different wood-wise. So those are all 3-ply shells. We have a mixture of maple, poplar, maple. We have one tom that is mahogany, poplar, mahogany, and another one is mahogany, poplar, maple. So it's quite funny that you can basically see, as it was often the case back in the day, that companies used what they had in stock, and they started building the shells. Shell information, also a fact with the old Ludwig kits, they are always not exactly round. So this is the same here, that 13-inch tom and that 16-inch, they are not exactly round. Same applies to the bass drum. Reason for that fact is that the original wrap, the White Marine Pearl wrap, was glued basically inside of the plies, and then they started bending the shell around. So if you buy a Ludwig and you notice, oh my god, the shell is not round, don't worry. That is always the case with 60s Ludwig. However, that particular fact makes the sound, and I'm sure when you're watching the video, you will notice how beautiful this kit sounds now. It's very, very sensitive now. It has the typical warm Ludwig thing. However, at the same time, it cuts very, very well. And I also use it in rehearsals with my band, and I need to cut through basically 2 full stacks all the time, and it's definitely not a problem with that kit. So if you're thinking of getting a Ludwig, an old Ludwig kit, and you may think, oh wow, this is maybe not suitable for newer music, that's definitely not the case. So you can really basically use it for every genre, no matter if it's jazz, no matter if it's rock, no matter if it's metal or stoner or indie or rock and roll or whatever. So those are super, super versatile drums. And that was, I think, the recipe why Ludwig was so popular back in the day. Well, Ringo was another factor in the 60s, of course, but that array of styles that you can cover with the old wooden shelled Ludwig kits is just simply amazing. I also polished up the hardware. Hardware-wise, everything was there, so there were no lugs missing, there were no hoops missing, no claws or whatever, so everything was there. I thought a lot about it, what to do best, and I came to the conclusion, okay, let's put in some modern spices in order to make it as road compatible as possible. So the original rail mount was not an option for me. A, I'm a lefty, and B, I had loads of extra holes on the top of the shell, and I wasn't sure, because there were so many holes on it, if a rail consolette was ever mounted on the bass drum. I don't know that. That's something I will probably never find out. But anyway, the idea of having a rail consolette on a bass drum somehow appealed to me. And I looked up at the Ludwig site, and I discovered that nice Ludwig Atlas rail mount, which looks pretty cool. And what you can do is you can just put the rail mount into the holes of the lugs. So I did not have to drill more holes in it, which would be totally stupid, because I just filled them all and then I started drilling again. No, you can really easily mount it on the existing holes that are already in your bass drum, which is very cool. And B, it acts as a lug, basically, as you can see on the pictures. And at the same time, it also acts as like some kind of mounting system. So that thing, there is basically not a huge pressure on the shell, which helps that the tom can vibrate freely. And I do have lots of options here because of that ball thing in here. So I can adjust the tom as I wanted to, because I'm not a huge fan of mounting toms on snare stands. I don't like that at all, because I never get them into the position I want to. So that was definitely a very good invention. And I also put an Atlas tom mount onto this 13-inch tom here, also for the same reasons. There was a tom bracket originally mounted on it. However, the hole, there was just like a huge hole above it, and I was not sure if that holds up my style of playing. All in all, I don't regret anything on what I have done here, because it's super steady, it holds quite well, and also the sustain gets a lot better. Okay, now to the drumheads. Drumheads are all Evans. No big surprise, as I started working for the Dario last year. On the top head, I used the Evans UV1 reverse dot. On the snare, On the resonant side, I do use the Orchestral 300, which is worth checking out. To all the Ludwig fans who do not know this yet, the Orchestral 300 is basically a clone of the original Weathermaster head that was used back in the day for snare drums. On the toms, I do use the UV2s on the top, Genera Resonant on the bottom. On the bass drum, I do use the EQ4 Clear as better, and as a resonant head, I do use the EQ3 Coated on this particular kit. Cymbal-wise, all Istanbul Agop. This is an Exist Brilliant 14-inch hi-hat. That cymbal that stood here in the video is an 18-inch Exist Crash, 22-inch Aaron Sterling Crash Ride, and 20-inch Aaron Sterling Crash Ride. To sum it all up, is it worth doing a project like this? It was a very, very time-consuming process because we basically needed to rebuild everything. As I said before, the kit was unplayable. However, when you look at it now, you will maybe not realize that it looked that way. And this is something which personally makes me very, very proud, to be fairly honest, because A, I think it looks very, very cool. B, the sound is simply amazing. And C, I'm always happy when I can rescue something from the bin, basically. Okay, that's it for today. Hit the subscribe button below and feel free to give a comment if you like the video, if you have any further questions about this particular kit or how I approached certain things. Also, if you're interested in getting the heads that I use, there are links in the comment section below. And yeah, that's it for today, and bye bye.